it's cancer. In view of Cancer Week, I want to tell you the story about my mother and share with you my experience of how cancer affected me. So, last year around, or the year before last, my mother's stomach was filled with water, right? Whole lot of water and fluid. They drained so many liters out of my mom's stomach. It was like, where was all this coming from? And and I was home. This is crazy. I was home at work. No, it was on a weekend, and my sons. I was taking my boys, about to take my boys to go back to their mom's house. She called me from the hospital, emergency room. And she said they told me I got cancer. And I never forget the stuff that was going through my head, man. It was like you hear cancer, you automatically go to death, right? And even though we know that's not the case, but immediately you go because, you know, it made me think of mortality, of all the things that I didn't get a chance to do to show her. And immediately you become a caregiver. Despite if they handling it or not, she was in that room by herself. Got up. She said, "No, I'm good. I'm good," because she never want to bother anybody. And my mom's always try to act like she's strong, man. Well, it's not try. She is strong. And a lot of people who are strong and we look at strong, we think that they're not human. And I have that problem. We look at them as superhuman until they're not there no more. Or when they go through something that makes them so human that it messes up our program about them, right? And I sat there at the table with this stare on me, man. Like, this is my mom's. My mom's is like only 60, 62, 63 at the time. And they didn't know what type of cancer it was. They just figured it was cancer, right? And then we found out it was endometriosis cancer or uterine cancer. And I'm sitting there like, what the heck? And for the first time, my mother said, "I'm scared. I don't want to die, Joe." And so you got to be a caregiver, so you have to be strong, so you got to be like, "Hey, Mom, I'm sitting here, all right, Mom, I'm good. You're good. You're going to be okay. You're going to beat it. We're not worrying about this, right? Because I got to blow it off like I'm not freaking out inside. Because it's the last thing you want to do is to freak out, to make them feel, make them feel anxiety and overreacting and whatever the case. And now you're making it about you. And I didn't want to make it about me, So I was like, man, what the heck? So I had to stay strong. And immediately she went into planning mode. And that's the hardest thing to hear. Take care of my grandkids. And it had a different spin on it. Because she just got diagnosed with cancer. And the first thing she says is that you take care of my grandkids if I gotta go. I said, "Mom, you're not going nowhere. You're not going nowhere." And she started fighting. And she fought, and she was fighting, and she's still fighting to this day And it was a different person. And I never forget what my mother said. She said, Joe, I got to do this for me. I got grandbabies. I got to do this. I got to fight this. I got to fight this. She went to praying. And I never felt so powerless in my life. I'm a combat veteran, man. I've been through so much in my life. But I never felt so helpless in my life, man, at that moment. You know, because she taught me how to be strong. And one of the things I cannot stand about people, when we're strong, people think that you can do it all and you can handle it, but they don't understand it's just because nobody else stood up to do it. Is that everybody talk. So they think you can handle anything and they don't understand that you're human. And my mother, for the first time in my 45 years of living, became human. Treatment started. We went back and forth. She was freaking out. Treatment started. And I'll never forget the first day of treatment, I sat in there. It had to been, we got there early in the morning, and it had to be 9 o'clock at night. And all I could do every time I took my mother to treatment is be quiet. Because I don't know what it feels like to not have her. I wasn't ready, prepared for this. But I kept saying, it's not about me. It's not about me. It's not about me. It's not about me. And I stayed strong. I stayed strong. Because this is your mother. And the doctors will go and, you know, they come back and they'll say, you know, all this stuff, and you got to go familiarize yourself with all this jargon you don't understand, you know? You're like, oh, what's this mean? You know, cancer engines and all this and all these tests, and she had to do, but she kept going. She was fighting for her life. And the best thing I can do is just support her. But I felt so helpless and powerless and afraid. Every time the phone rang, I would think that that was it. And I'll never forget the first time my mother cried. She said, I'm tired, Joe. I'm tired. I said, I know, Mom. We ain't got but that long. We ain't got but that long. And even to this day, it messes with me. You know, because it's hard to go back. Because I realized that I've taken my mother for granted. That in that moment she became human. Let me go back. When my mother had surgery, this is the first time I ever had to hold my mother's hand to help my mother do anything. She had surgery, and that surgery lasted so long. It seemed like she was back there forever. And I think they let her go around 11 o'clock that night. And no, it was probably around 8 or 9. And when my mother had surgery, my mother said, I'm sorry, Joe, for being a burden on you. My mother faced her greatest fear. being a burden. She thinks that she was a burden on her children. My mother faced it, her greatest fear being depending on her kids. And my mother cried all night, man. She was coming off the anesthesiologist and anesthesia. She cried all night. She was in so much pain. And she kept calling me out, Joe, I'm sorry, Joe, I'm sorry. I've only seen my mother in my 45 years of living cry 3 times. Really four. 2 of them was when her grandkids was born. One of them was when my grandmother died, and this is the 4th one. And she was more embarrassed that she had to be a burden, because that was her greatest fear. She did not want to be a burden to her kids. Not at all. No. That was her fear, right? And she wasn't. It was an honor. But that's a parent. That's a parent. And I watched my mother be a human for the first time. The strong woman never allowed anybody to do anything for her, needed help getting in bed. And she kept praying. She keeps, to this day, still prays. Now cancer-free, she new lease on life. All because she put herself first. All because she decided to say, this is a fight that I gotta fight. It's not about nobody else. It's about me. So you can't tell me that putting yourself first is the problem. It's actually the solution. And I thank my mother for teaching me a lesson that even strong people are human. And even strong people don't wake up and say they want to be strong. They do it because nobody else stood up for the position. Cancer sucks. That's my story. Take care.